Wow, I just realized I've been talking for 30 minutes. Actually 20 minutes. And I didn't press this button, the record button. Yikes, how was everybody? I have to do the rest of the show all over again now. It was a great show. Absolutely great show. And you missed it. But I'm back, and I'm going to try to replicate it, which is not easy to do. Not easy to do. I think I'll skip my... maybe I'll start there. I'll start all over again. I'll try to piece it back together one by one by one by one. Anyway, welcome to the show. This is Robert Phoenix. Coming to you live from Austin, Texas. You're listening to 15 Minutes of Flame, round 2. I actually started this at about 9:15 because I was running late. Now I'm running double late. How about that? Sorry for the double lateness. I had to remind myself to press the record button, which I thought I did. But that was not the case. Anyway, how is everybody? Now that I've had 20 minutes to warm up my act, I get to lay it out here again. So one of the things I talked about was I got pulled over the other night by the very attentive peace officers from Bee Cave, Texas. It was about 9:30 at night, and I decided to go watch the rest of the Cowboy game at a place up in Bee Cave. So I got my car, drove up there, and apparently my right headlight was out. Did not know it, by the way. Didn't know it. But I sure found out pretty quickly. And I got pulled over by one of Bee Cave's finest. It was also doing 64 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour zone. If you're ever in Austin and you're headed west on Highway 71 and you get to Bee Cave, slow down. It's a 55 mile per hour zone. Get it down to about 50 just to make sure. Make sure your headlights and taillights are in working order. Because, of course, they have such a huge crime wave in Bee Cave, where the average income is probably about $130,000 a year minimum. That's the average, that's the median income. You can guess how much higher the rest of the incomes are. That's actually where Matthew McConaughey lives. He lives in a place called Spanish Oaks, which is right next to Bee Cave. Gives you an idea as to what the socioeconomic profile for the area is. So the Bee Cave's finest, well, they're not out smashing international drug rings in Bee Cave, uncovering Islamic terror cells, all the things that they would be normally doing. They're pulling people over so that they can ensure the safety of the citizens of Bee Cave. So I get pulled over. And it's the most bizarre... I've had some weird situations in the past. When I was in California as a young guy, man, I got pulled over. I got pulled over a lot. I got pulled over a lot. One time, okay, how personal should I get? One time I was with a friend. Let's just say, we had consumed a certain pizza topping without the pizza, right? Like a sausage and mushroom pizza without the sausage, without the pizza. You know what I'm saying? So we're driving around San Francisco, and all of a sudden, I'm trying to get back up from Mission to Market, and there's always these can't turn left here, can turn here. If you've ever driven in San Francisco, unless you know the city, you'll get screwed up. You have to know that sometimes you got to turn right on Mission and whip around, onto Howard and double back so you can take another right and then shoot up like, 5th Street or something like that so you can get up to Market. And this is how it works. And I knew San Francisco like the back of my hand. I used to deliver flowers in San Francisco. Anyway, so I get pulled over, after consuming the pizza topping that I'm talking about. And I'm just like thinking, you know what kind of state you're in, right? Or maybe you don't. Let's just say it's an interesting one. So I get pulled over, and the cop comes up to me, and I'm like, oh my God, my friend's looking at me. His hands are sweating. I wasn't holding, but I could tell he's like rubbing them on his pants. He says, "May I see your license, please?" Give my license. He goes back to his car, and then he comes out, and he says, "No left turn on 3rd." And he has me sign the ticket, and then boom, he's gone. That was it. That was it. And it was the strangest moment because I felt like I was in a video game. Or not even a video game. Didn't have video games back then. It felt like it was in a board game. You know, like you just rolled the dice and you moved your little piece, 3 pieces ahead. And it was like no left turn on 3rd. $150 ticket. Which was, I think it was, back then, I don't think it was $150, but you know what I mean. I mean, that's the equivalent now. But there was no interaction. There was no, hey, how you doing? Da, 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 da. It was just like, I'm a minion of the Matrix. You made a bad move against the Matrix. Here's your ticket. See you later. And my friend and I were just like floored, like, what just happened? What just happened here? Because there was no human interaction. I mean, the guy could have been a robot, It was just so strange. Anyway, this was not the case the other night in Bee Cave because as I got pulled over, of course, had to deal with the light thing. I didn't know it was out. It's one of these things that happens. It happens. I got the light fixed yesterday. Because they give you fix-it tickets for these things. You don't want to roll around and say, well, you got a fix-it ticket for this the other day. I'm going to have to give you a real ticket now. We were being kind. We were being benevolent to you. But I'm afraid you didn't learn your lesson. You're a menace to society with that headlight out. You could kill somebody. Do you know how many people lose their lives because they have one headlight out every year? I don't either, but I bet it's a lot. Anyway. So then I had to explain a few other things that were very explainable. But now all of a sudden, Mr. Bee Cave, Officer Bee Cave, decides he's going to ask me a lot of questions. Where are you going? Where are you coming from? Did you have anything to drink tonight? If you ever get pulled over, you never tell them you had anything to drink. Even if you've only had one glass of wine. Even if you've only had one glass of wine, say, well, I had a glass of wine with dinner. No, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't admit to it. Says the devil on the left. The angel on the right. You should always be honest. If you're honest with the police, they'll appreciate it. They'll reward your honesty. Wrong answer. Because once you say, yeah, I had a glass of wine with dinner, you're out of the car, and now you're doing the sideshow, right? I'd like you to put your feet together and put your hands out by your side, and I'd like you to take your left hand and touch your nose and stick your right foot out and tilt your head back, and I'd like you to cross your eyes while you're doing it. Mr. Morris, would you like to, I'm afraid I'm going to have to bring out the breathalyzer and have you blow in the breathalyzer. And then, it's just a breathalyzer. Yeah, how long ago did you calibrate that breathalyzer? That's when people were getting off on DUIs, by the way, with the breathalyzer. Because they figured out that the breathalyzer was, connected to a computer software, and they asked for update records and all that stuff, and if the court couldn't provide the update records for the breathalyzer, guess what? People got off. But clearly, saying you didn't have anything to drink is the best course of action. So we covered that. But then he said, you know, your eyes are very red. So I'm tired. Why are you tired? Yeah, well, I'm tired because I just killed a family of 6 down the road. And if you've never killed a family of 6, let me tell you, man, it just really just takes the life out of you. You know? You just exhausted. Not only that, to deal with the dog, too. I mean, come on. I'm tired because I got to bed late last night. Why did you go to bed late last night? I swear to God, this is true. I know I joke around, but this is true. Well, I was working. I was up late working. Oh, what do you do? At this point, I'm getting really annoyed. I'm a writer. That's what I do. I see. Mr. Morris, I'd like you to look into my eyes for a minute. Of course, he flashes the light. And for about 10 years, what it felt like, I looked into Officer B. Cave's eyes. And I just, did my best to be neutral without being angry, and just kind of bore down into his eyes. I don't know what he saw, but I didn't see a heck of a lot. I saw a young guy who, was doing his best to protect and serve the people of Bee Cave. He let me go. I had to fix a ticket. I didn't even fix it in the morning. Moved on. That was how the other night was. So here we are again. The second part of the first part that you didn't hear. Sorry. So I wanted to talk about the NFL, and I wanted to talk about how it's relevant and why it's relevant. And we're going to get to it, but we're going to get to it in a roundabout way. I was watching a video last night on YouTube, and it was a very enlightening video. And it broke down what's going on in Syria, because there's still fighting going on in Syria, even though ISIS is getting routed. Guess what? There's a new player in Syria. There's a new player. If one group of demonically possessed fighters doesn't work, have no fear. Sauron's got some more. Just pumping them out of the satanically possessed soldier vat. So there's a city in Syria called El Azor. And by the way, if you've seen any footage of these cities in Syria, oh my God, it's freaking heartbreaking. I mean, these cities have been pounded and pounded and pounded by rockets and mortars, and they look like dystopian nightmares, and there are kids running around in these cities, wounded or dead, or if they're not, they're playing games to amuse themselves amidst the horror of war. It is mind-blowing what's going on over there, and of course our media doesn't show it. Doesn't show it at all. We've got a big war happening, and we've been playing a role in it, and the American people are completely unaware of what's taking place. Completely. Because the media doesn't show it. So here's what happened. El Azor is a city that has a petroleum. They have a refinery there. They're taking the oil out of the ground and refining it. Excuse me. ISIS had occupied El Azor, and they were getting defeated. Normally, ISIS blows everything up when they leave. They didn't this time. And who was fighting against ISIS? The Syrian army and a third party who has been introduced into the conflict, theoretically helping Syria. It's the Kurds. The Kurds now armed, equipped, and managed by your friends in the 202 area code. That's right. They're now our proxy army. The Kurds are our proxy army, along with our pals over there in the Middle East. And just as ISIS is leaving El Azor, and the Syrian army is rushing in to recapture the petroleum refinery, guess what happens? The Kurds change sides. Now they're not fighting with the Syrians, they're fighting against them as they occupy the refinery. They get there first. They position themselves there first. Gee. So now there's a new, now the Syrians are fighting basically two armies. They've pretty much defeated ISIS. ISIS is basically going back to Europe. And they're being integrated into places like Sweden, where they're receiving great government benefits for the hard-fought time in Syria. They're being rewarded as if they're actually fighting for the Swedish army. That's the kind of benefits they're getting. Anyway, I don't want to get too far off the freeway here. So now there's the Kurds. Who's backing the Kurds? It's the U.S. The U.S. and our pals over there in the Middle East. Yeah, they've decided to back the Kurds. And who's backing the Syrian army? Well, it's Russia. So what do we have? We have a de facto war with the United States against Russia. So technically, we're at war with Russia. We are at war with Russia. And you won't find that in the media. You won't have people like Lindsey Graham or Maxine Waters or Dianne Feinstein or Nancy Pelosi or John McCain. You won't have any of them talking about it in these terms, but that's the way it is. That's the way it is. And that's what's happening. And the Kurds now, the Kurds are going to get all the arms, all the training. They're going to be, they've been weaponized, right? And unless they're defeated again by the Syrians and by the Russians, the Kurds, with all the weapons and all the training, guess what? They will pose a threat to the Turks because the Turks don't like the Kurds. And the Kurds want part of Turkey. And Erdogan does not want to give them part of Turkey. So Erdogan knows that our friends in the Middle East and the United States are behind the Kurds, and he's pissed off. He's now got a little feud going on with our friends in the Middle East because it's all about oil, right? It's about oil control, getting Assad out of Syria, flipping it Syria, getting them into the IMF and the World Bank. This is what's going on. So if the Kurds get weapons and they get military training and they get momentum, who knows? I mean, they might be as easily vanquished or vanquished quickly in the same way that ISIS has been dispatched, or maybe not. Maybe the Kurds run that refinery, they start to make money because you've got to make money. Sales are happening, they're able to buy more weapons, blah, 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 blah. Next thing you know, Turkey's got a fight on their hands. And Turkey doesn't want that. Not that Turkey's the saints of the Middle East or the Fertile Crescent, far from it. But you can see what the point I'm making here. If you're Erdogan, if you're a dictator, you don't want anybody getting training in arms. No, that would be terrible. It would be a threat to your hegemony. Anyway, this is what's going on. People don't know this. People are oblivious to it. Where are the questions? Because all our political leaders on the left want to do is just slam Trump. That has been the memo from day one. And on the right, the Republicans, all they want to do is be a land anchor to Trump. And that's all it's been. It's been one defeat after another until yesterday. Until yesterday. And by the way, Trump has done two things that are really important. Whatever kind of agreement we have with the Paris Accord, he got out of it. Despite the urgings of his daughter and despite the urgings of his son-in-law, Secret Agent 666, he pulled out. And he got us out of the TPP, and that's huge. And that's one of the reasons why these guys are so pissed off. It's not due to the fact that the United States wants to be a sovereign nation or whatever. It's really the fact that he unplugged two major pieces from the globalist, collectivist, internationalist socket, and they now want to sock it to him. Yesterday was a victory, though. And it was not a victory for Trump. It was a victory for the process. And this is what I've been saying for a long time. For a long time. When Trump was running for president, I said, look, this is a good thing. What's happening is a good thing. Because what happened is that he broke the chain of custody from Reagan, who was really Bush, all the way through to Obama. If you look at it, you've got Reagan, Bush basically running the government. Then you had the second term of Bush, which is really the first term of Bush, but it was really the second term. And then after that, you had 8 years of Clinton, and we know that the Clintons and the Bushes are tied at the hip. You don't have to go down the rabbit hole too far, but you'll find that. You'll find out. And then you had 8 more years of Bush. So you've got Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush. And then you had 5 years of essentially Hillary Clinton kind of running the State Department while Barack Obama, Barack Obama was there to push health care across the line. Hillary Clinton would never have been able to do it. If Hillary Clinton had been president of the United States, the health care reform bill wouldn't have passed. Sorry, that's just the way it is. And it passed mostly because nobody wanted to challenge Obama. If you challenged Obama, you were racist. And I didn't understand that at the time. I was kind of naive. I thought, hey man, people are people. Politics are politics. Can't we see clearly enough? Oh, no, we can't. No, we can't. So Obama, his strategic mission was to pass the health care bill. Everything after that was just going to be gravy. The foreign policy, for the first 5 years, that was run by Hillary Clinton. So what Trump did, Trump came along and he blew all that up. Jeb Bush didn't make it to the White House. Hillary Clinton didn't make it to the White House. Marco Rubio didn't make it to the White House. Ted Cruz didn't make it to the White House. All of these people would have had ties to the Bush administration. The other outsider, Bernie Sanders, was never going to make it. Bernie Sanders was never going to be president. Sorry, if somehow Bernie had said, let me see if I can do my Sanders. I'm going to run as an independent. I've decided to run as an independent and break away from the Democratic National Party because I know people and they're tired. They're tired of Wall Street. They're tired. The American people are tired. So I'm running for president. That would have been Bernie Sanders. He didn't do it, though. Of course not. He didn't even meet a little peep. Not a peep. So it was Trump. Trump was the hand grenade in the room. Everybody ran. It doesn't matter that the hand grenade didn't really go off. I mean, maybe it went off in the way that people imagined. Think of a hand grenade, it gets tossed in a room and everybody believes that it went off. But it never really went off. This is what Trump has been done. But what I urged during that process is that this is an awakening. We are waking up. We're waking up. Now, am I a dyed-in-the-wool Christian conservative? No, I'm not. I'm not. There are certain things that, I'm an astrologer. And I have all kinds of clients, right? I have clients who are gay, men and women. I don't care. I don't care what their sexual persuasion is. I don't care what they choose to do with their bodily fluids. They're people to me. And if they come to me and they want to have a session, they're a person, and I treat them accordingly. So, I'm not hung up on that. I'm just not. That's kind of my POV on a personal level. On a social level, I don't, I'm not really keen about teaching 5-year-olds that sodomy is good. Well, look, here you have a little bum, right? And in the bum, it's like having a hot dog in a bun. It's like, I'm just not into it. It sounds extreme, right? But I'm just not into that. But personally, I don't care, who you are, as long as you're there and present and you want to, work and get through whatever it is you get through. I'll be there to do that. So I'm also, not completely out of favor with things like medicinal marijuana and, growing plants and hemp and CBD. I mean, there's a lot of things that I'm, I would say I'm socially progressive on. But in terms of personal rights, that's when it comes, to be a very clear demarcation for me. So when somebody like Roy Moore wins, I think it's a victory. I think it's a victory for the process and the momentum that began here in the waking up. Because we have to wake up. We have to wake up. And Christians are very awake people. Now, they've always got the prophecy thing, sort of tied to them. There's the prophecy balloon, like the thought balloon. Like, there's some great Christian channels on YouTube where people break things down in really amazing kinds of ways, right? And with the biblical prophecy stuff and tied in there as well, if you're into that. I'm not always into it, but it's interesting, right? They're awake. They're a group of people that are awake, for the most part. There are certain, geographical locations in the world that they're not always awake to, but that's a whole different story, sort of, in a different show. So Roy Moore was the anti-Trump candidate in this election down in Alabama to take Jeff Sessions' seat. And Trump went down there and he campaigned for Luther Strange. Did you imagine naming your kid Luther and his last name is Strange? Strange is strange enough anyway, and Luther is not your typical 21st century name. Of course, he's not a 21st century person. He's coming from the South. But Luther Strange is like a combination of Lex Luthor and Doctor Strange, where you get a very confused character who uses the power of darkness for positive outcome and good intention, and the most evil character in the history of Superman. Talk about confused. Anyway, Luther Strange went up against Roy Moore, and Roy Moore trounced him. Roy Moore, constitutionalist. And this is the biggest nightmare that the globalists / internationalists / the collectivists have, is the Roy Moores of the world. And there will be more Moores. There will be more Moores. This is where things are going. Chuck Norris went down there and campaigned for Nigel Farage. Went to Alabama to campaign for Roy Moore. This is the same Nigel Farage, who campaigned for Donald Trump. And who was Donald Trump backing? He was backing Luther Strange. Did Trump want to back Strange? Probably not. Trump is compromised. He's totally compromised. And so what he did is he dropped a hand grenade in the room again with the NFL, which we'll get to. So this is the biggest nightmare that these people have. It's not Trump. It's the Roy Moores of the world, the people that elect them. So they're going to have to do something, right? They've been trying to demonize Trump's base. This is what's been happening. They've been trying to demonize it, right? Like everybody that voted for Trump somehow is connected to the fake KKK people in Charlottesville, in the false flag of Charlottesville. It was massive guilt by association. And now you have Greg Popovich from the San Antonio Spurs coming out saying white people need to feel uncomfortable. Well, Greg, why don't you feel uncomfortable? Why don't you take a salary cut? Why don't you take about half your salary? And why don't you be a good white person and donate about half your salary to some great cause? Why don't you, in fact, Greg, why don't you be really uncomfortable? Why don't you work for a year at the same level as government assistance? In fact, why don't you do that for about 3 years? And really put your ideological discomfort out there and wear it like a badge. People want to get along. People want to have, at least they did at one point, lives for their kids, good lives for their kids. They want to have the ability to provide for their families. They want to be able to have good health and good water, clean food, right? And all that, all those things that we all share and hold in common as a species have been eradicated, moved down, moved way down Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so what we're going through now is this, I don't know, charade. It's shadow puppetry. John Rappaport addressed the whole protest thing, and he did a really good job of it on his website. He talks about how the real tragedy here is what's going on in the inner cities, and the crushing poverty, and the amount of money that we've spent since Johnson's war on poverty, which is in the trillions of dollars since 1965. So we're well into the war on poverty in the Great Society. And how's that working out? How's that working out? What we should be addressing is the drug problem in the inner cities, the extreme violence that takes place in the inner cities because people are jockeying for real estate to sell drugs, to knock off their competition. And then, of course, you have the casual victims, the collateral damage of the drug wars inside the inner cities. Do the NFL players talk about this? Many of them have come from these environments. They don't address the root causes. What they address is the so-called police brutality. Try being a cop in an inner city. Try that. Try being a cop in East St. Louis. Try being a cop in Richmond, California. Let's see how saintly you are. And I'm not giving cops a pass. The police have been trained by the IDF basically ever since. A lot of police departments trained by the IDF since 9/11. We have the militarization of the police. They're not. It's not always the. It's not always the best and the brightest. Let's put it that way. And there are some good police out there. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to slam. I almost got slammed by a New York cop the other day. That's another story. You know that story. But, these are the real crushing and pressing issues that these NFL players should be addressing. Right? That's where they came from. It's like there's a mortar wound and they want to put a Band-Aid on it. The whole idea of politicizing your position is a tenuous one at best. Because as long as the position is a popular one, and one that does not incur the wrath of sponsors and or ownership and or any particular group that is involved in either of those positions, industries, then said protesting is welcome with arms wide open. But I'll give you an example of when it's not. Richard Mendenhall used to play with the Pittsburgh Steelers, retired when he was 26. He's now one of the writers on the show Ballers, which is, of course, starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Richard Mendenhall was a very good running back. And at the height, he's a Gemini, by the way. Of course he's a Gemini. He was very popular on Twitter, and he coined himself, he was a conversationalist. Well, when Osama bin Laden was captured, right, and then killed, and then mercifully and respectfully buried at sea, people were going nuts. They were dancing in the streets. Oh my God. It was like ding dong, the witch is dead. People were, oh, we got him. We got him. We got him. Oh yeah. There was a lot of super intense schadenfreude in that moment. I wasn't even schadenfreude. It was more than that. It was vindication. It was release. That somehow, the ghost and the specter of 9/11, all those lives who were theoretically lost due to the fact that some guy on a dialysis machine in a cave masterminded the whole thing. What did Richard Mendenhall tweet about? He tweeted, what's it say about our society that we can celebrate with such passion and glee and abandon the death of this one man? How as a society does hate turn into a celebratory moment in time? We don't know everything that happened with him. So this was immediately taken that Richard Mendenhall was a sympathizer for Osama bin Laden. He's a Steeler, by the way. Was a Steeler. And it's like he got excoriated for that. Excoriated. He also said, we don't even know everything about 9/11. Whoa! A National Football League player questioning 9/11? Talk about the third rail. He lost sponsorships. This dude lost sponsorships. And not one person, not one NFL player stood by Richard Mendenhall. Not one. Not a single one. Do you know why? Because they didn't want to risk their gravy train. You see, those were positions of protest that were not allowed. They were outside of the framework about what you could protest about. What they're protesting about now will be rewarded. They'll gain sponsorships. Von Miller lost one, which is too bad. I like Von Miller. He lost a local sponsorship in Denver for a car dealership. I like Von Miller. I think he's really bright and funny, personable. He's a good player. I think he's being dragged along just like everybody else. I mean, what's happening with the NFL is like they're trawling for fish, and they throw the net out, and they just get what they get. Anyway, Richard Mendenhall retired at the age of 26. He's a writer now. Nobody helped him. Nobody stood by him. Nobody was arm in arm with Richard Mendenhall. No, he got excoriated. His coach, Mike Tomlin, the same coach who reprimanded Alejandro Villanueva for being the lone Steeler to stand for attention, he got all over Richard Mendenhall. You see, if all of a sudden the players said, hey, we've changed our platform, we're not kneeling anymore for, whatever we've been kneeling for. What we're kneeling for now is we want an investigation on 9/11. We're standing arm in arm because we don't believe what happened in 9/11 was really what happened. Holy Moses. What do you think would happen then? You think they would get to keep their sponsorships, their advertising deals? You think ownership would stand arm in arm with them? No freaking way. What if they said all of a sudden, hey, we've noticed that, there's this country in the Middle East that has a big lobby here, and they spend tons and tons of money on this lobby. And we seem to be fighting a lot of wars for this one country. We're not down with that. We're gonna get on one knee until all of a sudden you uncouple, your interests with this country. What do you think would happen then? You see, it's all about what's allowed. And these guys, some of whom are well-meaning, some of them are probably nice guys, but they don't get it. They're being dragged along. Well, Major League Baseball, they've had one guy protest, Bruce Maxwell for the A's. What you won't see, unless it's the Boston Red Sox, by the way, what you won't see is a ton of protesting like this in Major League Baseball. Do you want to know why? Because it's the most integrated international sport in America, except for maybe soccer. But who gives a shit about soccer? Nobody cares about soccer. Hockey might be a little more international only because of the influx of the Canadian players and the few Russians and Swedes that play over here. But baseball is really integrated. I mean, you got players from the Dominican, Venezuela, you got players from Cuba, you got players from Curacao, players from Mexico, Panama, Japan, Korea, Canada, all over the place. All over the place. What you don't have is you don't have a lot of black Americans playing baseball. They've migrated out of baseball. They play football, they play basketball, for whatever reason. It's not the way the sport was in the 70s and the 80s. Growing up, there were a lot of really great black American players. You had, Hank Aaron. You had Willie Mays. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. Pitchers, great pitchers. Vida Blue. Don Wilson. Ferguson Jenkins, who's a Canadian, by the way. So this is, baseball. Baseball, even though it got off to a rough start, right? Eventually, Jackie Robinson comes along, and it becomes integrated. And then it becomes even more integrated because of the introduction of the Caribbean players and the Latin American players and the Central American players. Do you think the Latin American players are going to take a knee, or the Central American players are going to take a knee? Are you kidding me? They're kissing the ground they're walking on in this country. They're not going to disrespect the flag because they know what it's like to grow up in a shithole. The Dominican Republic's a nice place, like if you're a tourist, but I guarantee you growing up there is no picnic. No picnic at all. Growing up in a place like Mexico, no picnic. Panama, no picnic. Curacao, no picnic. These places are generally poor. If you're in Cuba, you've got to go through Cuba, and then you've got to have the nads to defect. That's no picnic either. Do you think these people want to go back? Do you think they want to piss on the flag? And I am not, having a patriotic moment here. I'm having a realistic, pragmatic moment. They're not going to do that. Do you think Venezuelan players are going to say, hey, man, I'm tired, man. I'm tired of this place. Do you think we want to go back to Venezuela and deal with Venezuela? Nobody ever talks about that. Nobody ever says, hey, look at these guys over here. They're actually really grateful to be here in this place and make lots of money, which they would never be able to do in their country. Not to the degree that they're making this kind of money. It's huge. You won't see it in baseball. Not happening. So why is this important? Why is the NFL important? Why is what we're going through important? Because it's part of the awakening process. You have fans burning their tickets, fans burning their jerseys, fans. This one guy in Buffalo, longtime employee of the Buffalo Bills, he quit. He quit at the game on Sunday. That's a job. The guy's got a job, and he couldn't stand it. He couldn't stand it. So the NFL's in trouble because all of a sudden now they've pissed off the same people that voted Roy Moore, basically, voted for Roy Moore in Alabama. And this is what's happened, that there's an awakening taking place. And it may be very awkward. It may be an awkward awakening. You've had people that have been in the caves, slumbering for decades, just trying to get on, trying to live a life, trying to believe in a country that they once believed in and saw it being dismantled and taken from them every single day, whether it was through the loss of a job to somebody who came from another country, or the loss of a job because their company went to another country, or their children succumbed to some, strange kind of misfortune on the road of life, drug addiction, the loss of their job. Watching the identity of the country, not even the collective identity, but the personal identity of the country, be redefined and changed by a fractional group. A fractional group who isn't even represented at a high level of the population, all of a sudden defining who we are, what we can say about our gender. And if you don't approach it in a certain way, you would be penalized for that. Do you know what a mind lock that is? I've spent the last 10 years of my life in my own way disassembling all of these things, so I can sit here, with my mouth behind this mic talking about this stuff. This is work, right? This is work to disassemble these things. And some of these people have, in their own way, they may have been doing their work, but all of a sudden they woke up. And you know what they said? They said, fuck it. They said, fuck it. I'm tired. I'm done. I'm over it. And what is the knee-jerk reaction for these people? By the way, some of whom, contrary to popular belief, are not all white. The awakening process doesn't know. There's no skin tone or color that has a patent or copyright on the awakening process. Because once you get into it, once you become awake, then you realize what's going on. You realize what's happening. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what sex you are. It doesn't matter what race you are. It doesn't matter what religion you are. When you are awake, you are awake. And you see what's happening. Now, there are different definitions of awake. I'm sure Colin Kaepernick says he's awake. That's not for me to judge. But this is what's happened. This is what's going on right now. And so let the NFL burn. That's my feeling. Let it burn. Let the jerseys burn. Let the tickets burn. Let people walk away. Let ownership see what's happening. You know, ownership's freaked out already. Who is it now? Is it Dan Rooney? I always, you know, it's like, you know, I think it's Dan Rooney Jr., or one of the Rooneys, whoever runs the team now, the third generation of Rooney. He sent out a letter to fans, basically saying, hey, look, come on, it's okay. You know, don't get too worked up over this. We want you to come to the stadium. We want you to come. These are working class people. This is the demographic of the NFL. Working class people to upper middle class people who can afford the damn tickets, and they're expensive. And if they walk away from the sport, you're not going to get them back. Trust me, you are not going to get them back. They will be done. And the NFL's ratings will continue to fall, will continue to plummet, just like ESPN's ratings have plummeted over the course of the last 3 years. The same thing will happen to the NFL. And you maybe say, well, you know, there it is. America's sport. You know, this is what defined America. And it's being wrecking balled. And it's okay. It is really okay. Because guess what? It will accelerate the awakening process. And if we have to sacrifice, you know, our sacred pastimes, then so be it. I mean, this is where it's at. You know, this is the, you know, this is the big enchilada. So be it. Let's see what happens. Let's see what that triggers. Let's see what some, you know, the novel neuropeptides and novel neurotransmitters now that are going off in people's brains, right? As a result of this process. Let's see where that takes them. It could be very interesting. We are in interesting times. Make no mistake about it. These times are unlike any other time in history. And we're all waking up. You know, even the players on the sidelines in the NFL, they're trying to wake up. They're trying to wake up. They're doing their best to wake up in their own way. I'm giving them a bit of a pass here, even though I believe they're being used. I believe they're being manipulated. Some of them believe that they're actually standing up for something and waking up. And this is what happens during the waking up process. People get moved around. You know, the herd gets moved. You know, the border collies or whoever it is, right? They move the herd along. It's like, over here is big awakening. No, we don't want them over here. Let's herd them over here so they feel like they're actually experiencing something, whether it's a virtue signal or some kind of, you know, epiphany, groveling epiphany like Greg Popovich. I can't stand Greg Popovich. I can't stand the guy. And not because he, you know, went on, you know, did this litany about, you know, making white people feel uncomfortable. It goes back to basketball. This guy is one of the most patronizing, you know, self-serving, stiff shirts, stuffed shirts in the NBA. Watch his press conferences. Watch what he does when, you know, in the middle of the game when he has to be asked a question. He's a complete and utter jerk. You know, you know what I'd love to do? I'd love to, like, you know, go to San Antonio one day and just run into Greg Popovich at a bar in San Antonio. Sit next to him at a bar and have his ear for about 20 minutes. Let's see how Popovich would deal. And I'd love to have him on the show, man. It's like, come on, Greg, get on here, let's talk. Anyway, I don't want to keep rambling. There was a guy who did a speech at the UN one time. You're only supposed to speak for about 15 minutes at the UN, by the way. Did you know that? Trump spoke for 41. You're only supposed to have 15 minutes of flame at the UN. I didn't know that until recently. There's a dude from India who spoke for 8 hours. at the UN. Can you believe that? 8 hours. My God. What happens over the course of that 8 hours? People get up, they go to the bathroom, have lunch. They go down to the secret room beneath the UN, their meditation room. Commune with the forces of Baal. Ball, B-A-L. Do you ever notice all of our sports have ball in it? Football, baseball, basketball. Then there's hockey. God bless hockey. And God bless each and every one of you. Thank you for listening to today's show. I would say today's show is a bit of an exorcism to some degree. And you can always exercise whatever it is you're carrying around every single day of your life, whether you exercise with an E-X-E-R-C-I-E-S-E or exercise from a different perspective through writing, through chanting, through prayer, through fasting, through meditation, through running, through exercising, through dancing, whatever it is, you can move and groove and shake the devil. Just like Tommy Bolton said a long time ago. So as we sign off here, get out there, get loose, stay fluid, stay awake. This is Robert Phoenix. You've been listening to 15 Minutes of Flame at 5115. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to so open as possible. I'll see you.